Welcome back to another edition of the Saturday to Sunday Football Podcast. I am Paul Perdichizzi, and thank you for joining me as always. NFL Draft, a couple days in the books now, recording this Thursday night. If you were with me last week during the NFL Draft, I did recap podcasts for every single night. Night 1 of the NFL Draft, night 2, night 3, where I shared my thoughts on almost every single selection about the prospect themselves, film thoughts, whether there was a great pick, bad pick, questionable pick. But what I didn't do was kind of look at things team by team. Spent the last couple of days wrote articles that are up on S2SFootball.com, sharing my recaps team by team, favorite picks, value picks, questionable picks, ranking each team's draft hauls by division. And now I'm going to put that out tonight on the podcast, the NFC teams, next podcast, the AFC teams, and just kind of putting the pieces together now for the team's draft hauls from the 2025 NFL Draft. Also, the day right after the NFL Draft concluded, also did a podcast, sharing my initial Dynasty rookie rankings by position and an overall big board. So let's get right into it. Lot to cover tonight, going through every single team in the NFC. We're going to start with the NFC East. Dallas Cowboys in round 1 took Alabama offensive guard Tyler Booker. Round 2, pick 44, Boston College edge rusher Donovan Ezaraku. Pick 3 in the 3rd round, pick 76, East Carolina cornerback Siobhan Revell. 5th round, Texas running back Jaden Blue. Also in the 5th round, Florida linebacker Shamar James. 6th round, Oregon offensive tackle Ajante Cornelius. 7th round had a trio of picks, UCLA defensive tackle Jay Toya, Clemson running back Phil Maffa, and also Maryland defensive tackle Tommy Agabostu. Favorite thing that Dallas did, my 2 favorite picks, Donovan Ezaraku and Siobhan Revell Jr. Both of those guys were considered potential first-round talents, especially Ezaraku. He was in like Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft the night before at like pick 17. Siobhan Revell, if it wasn't for the injury, was looked at as a first-round talent. So I thought those were clearly my 2 favorite picks. My value pick also, you could say, for both of them was Ezaraku and Siobhan Revell. Both of them were picked significantly later than I think most people expected them to. My questionable move by Dallas, not taking a running back until the 5th round, not a guy who profiles as their RB1. Also, not taking a wide receiver in this. I understand that they were thinking about taking Tet McMillan at 12, but they passed on Tet McMillan at 12, and they never circled back. They didn't pass on him. He wasn't there, so they pivoted to Tyler Booker, but they never went back to the well at the wide receiver position. Tyler Booker, solid pick. I thought it was a little early for a guard with some athleticism concerns, but high character, tough, physical, going to be a great addition to that O-line. I would have almost liked to see Marcus Golden there, but they did get really tremendous value on Ezaraku, Siobhan Revell. I'm intrigued by Jaden Blue, the big playability that he offers, but I just would have liked to see Dallas target a running back a little bit earlier in this draft class to kind of be the clear RB1 ahead of Javonte Williams, and I would have liked to see them add a receiver at some point in this draft to kind of help out CD Lamb there. So I thought there was things they could have done there that they didn't do. Next up, the Giants. 1st round, 3rd pick overall, they took Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter. They trade back into the 1st round. Pick 25, they take Ole Miss quarterback Jackson Dart. Top of the 3rd round, Toledo defensive tackle Darius Alexander. Early 4th round, Arizona State running back Cam Skattebo. 5th round, Purdue offensive tackle Marcus Bowe. 7th round, Nebraska tight end Thomas Fidone. And also in the 7th round, Oklahoma State cornerback Corey Black. My favorite 2 picks, not getting cute at pick number 3, just taking the last blue chip player in this draft class in Abdul Carter. And then anyone who knows me, I've been saying that I wanted Cam Skattebo on the Giants. I thought early 4th round was appropriate value for him. I would have even taken him in the early 3rd round, but most people thought he was a late 3, early 4. So those are my 2 favorite picks by the Giants. My value pick, Marcus Bowe. I thought he would have been in consideration early 3rd round where they took Darius Alexander. So value pick Marcus Bowe in the 5th round, but also Darius Alexander. A lot of people thought there was no chance Darius Alexander was going to fall to the 3rd round. Most people thought the Giants, if they kept pick 34, were going to lose out on him if they didn't pick him there because he wasn't going to make it to 65. And Marcus Bowe could have been an early 3rd rounder too. So Bowe and Darius Alexander, 2 really good value picks. The questionable move here, trading up and selecting Jackson Dart over Shedeur Sanders. It's possible they could have just sat at 34 and Jackson Dart would have fell into their laps. It sounds like all the reports that for the longest time, Shedeur Sanders was clearly ahead of some Giants, the GM, maybe some of the people up in their staff, ahead of Jackson Dart. But the way that interview went with Brian Dable and some of the other stuff, I think really rubbed them the wrong way. They pivoted to Jackson Dart, who it sounds like might have been Brian Dable's guy all along. But I think it's still a questionable move. There are definitely questions about whether or not Jackson Dart can transition to the NFL game. How quickly he transitions. Is this the regime going to even be there to see him get a real opportunity? And then also, did they have to trade up to get him? I think is a legitimate question. But all in all, I love the Giants draft. Top to bottom, I thought they got really good value for every single pick besides the Jackson Dart pick. I thought he was always going to be that late one, early two, but every other pick, really good value. Intrigued. I like Thomas Fidone a lot too. I think he can emerge to be their second tight end on their depth chart and even potentially push Dio Johnson down the line. That's how much I like his pass catching ability and athleticism. So I liked what the Giants did. Now it's time for them to start producing, save this regime, and hopefully Jackson Dart develops into the quarterback they think he could be. The Eagles in the first round, they move up one spot at the end of round one. They take Alabama linebacker Jahad Campbell. In the second round, they take Texas safety Andrew Makuba. In the fourth round, they take Nebraska defensive tackle Ty Robinson. In the fifth round, they take Central Florida quarterback Mac McWilliams. In the fifth round, they take Georgia linebacker Shmuel Munden. Later in the fifth round, Boston College center Drew Kendall. In the sixth round, they had 4 picks. They took Syracuse quarterback Kyle McCord, Michigan offensive tackle Miles Hinton, Texas offensive tackle Cameron Williams, and then Virginia Tech edge rusher Antoine Powell-Ryland. Favorite pick, Jahad Campbell. If he was clean medically, I think he's very possible he could have been taken somewhere between like 12 and 18. So for the Eagles to sit there, get him at pick 31 with a small trade up that only cost them a 5th-round pick, and they get an impact player that, yes, is an off-the-ball linebacker, but he's a really good edge rusher too. So he's going to add another explosive element to that defense, and arguably was a top 15 player in this class. And I think for the Eagles, he probably was a top 15 player in this class. Value picks, Shmuel Munden Jr. and Cameron Williams. Most people had Munden ranked inside their top 80, 90 picks. Everyone thought he was almost a lock day pick. You didn't see anybody's top 100s really that didn't have Munden Jr. in it. Most people thought he was going to be a late 2 to early to mid 3. He falls all the way to the 5th round. Tremendous value. And then Texas offensive tackle Cameron Williams. There were some people like the scouts that Bob McGinn talked to for his great articles over at Go Long TD. They had Cameron Williams as a projected top 100 pick. So for Cameron Williams to fall all the way to pick 207, even if maybe that estimation of his drafting was too high, most people had him safely as a 4th-round pick. So for him to fall all the way to pick 207, tremendous value there for the Eagles. I think the questionable decision, and it's minor, I like Andrew Makuba's game a lot, but I don't like him as much as Xavier Watts. I thought the ball skills by Xavier Watts was a little bit more intriguing. So I maybe would have pivoted at pick 64 to Xavier Watts instead of Andrew Makuba, but that's less. I like the player Makuba. It's more about maybe just preferring somebody else. And then the one thing I will say I'm a little surprised with is there's been a lot of rumors that maybe Dallas Goedert, they could trade him. They could potentially move on. I'm surprised they didn't grab a tight end somewhere in this draft class. It could have been round 5 or round 6. Take a young tight end, maybe see if he develops into something. I was surprised they didn't take a tight end somewhere in the draft class. Next up, Washington Commanders. They didn't have a lot of draft capital. They traded it. Laramie Tunsil trade, Deebo Samuel trade. I think one was from last year when they traded from Lattimore as well. So they were working with less draft capital for sure. First round, pick 29, they took Oregon offensive tackle Josh Carnley Jr. Second round, they took Ole Miss cornerback Trey Amos. 4th round, they took Virginia Tech wide receiver Jalen Lane. 6th round, they took UCLA linebacker Kane Medrano. And the 7th round, they took Arizona running back Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. Overall, with the picks they had, I thought they did a solid job. I thought Connerly adds a starting caliber offensive tackle to the mix. They're trying to fortify that offensive line in front of Jaden Daniels, which is always smart when you have a young franchise quarterback. I thought Trey Amos was a good pick. Jalen Lane was a good pick. This didn't have a lot of picks to work with, but I thought it was a solid draft all in all. My favorite picks, 2 of them, Jalen Lane and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I thought Jalen Lane was a really explosive, dynamic slot wide receiver that Virginia Tech's quarterback play hindered Lane really showing what he's fully capable of. I think he could be a really impactful player with Jaden Daniels at the helm. So I'm intrigued by the Jalen Lane pick there. I think he could develop into their number 3 wide receiver down the line. And then Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in the 7th round, really intrigued by him because He's a guy that if he played this year and didn't have those eligibility issues, I think we're talking about a guy who probably, even in this draft class, could have arguably went 2 rounds higher and been a 5th-round pick, not a late 7th-round pick. But I like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, really no-nonsense, tough physical runner, but he's got some burst and acceleration to his game. I like the pick of Krosky-Merritt. So him and Jalen Lane were my 2 favorite picks for Washington, even though I thought Connolly was a good pick. I thought Amos is under my category as the best value pick for Washington. If Trey Amos would have went to Buffalo at the end of round 1, I don't think anybody would have been surprised. I think most people would have applauded it as a solid pick for them. So they get him all the way at pick 61. My most questionable decision, even though I like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, I'm surprised they didn't take a running back to the 7th round. I really thought there was a real possibility they could have been in the mix for Travion Henderson in round 1. They pivoted off of running back to offensive tackle. They went for Connerly. I totally understand that, but I'm surprised somewhere, maybe, I know they went Jalen Lane, who I like to pick a lot too, but I'm surprised I picked in the 4th round, or they didn't consider it maybe at the end of the 2nd round if there was someone there they really liked, a Caleb Johnson type player, but he's a little bit more scheme specific. I just thought they would have made an investment at the running back position a little bit higher. Austin Eckler getting up there in age, Brian Robinson. I thought they might have looked for a more explosive element to that backfield. So that was one of the moves that surprised me a little bit. NFC East as a big picture. This is how I ranked them. Giants 1, Cowboys 2, Eagles 3, Commanders 4. Now, if you start adding the other pieces, I just based on the draft hauls they got right here. If you start adding the Commanders veterans that they traded for, you probably can bump them up a little bit. But I thought all in all, every team in the division had a really strong draft. I love the Giants draft. I thought the Cowboys, even though I wish they would have taken a running back and receiver, I thought they got really good players their first 3 picks, starting with Booker and then Siobhan Ravel and Ezeraku. Those first 3 picks, I love what Dallas did. The Eagles got some really high-quality players. I love their aggressiveness, making sure they get their guys. And then even the Commanders, I just talked about a bunch of prospects I liked. Obviously, they're working with a little bit less draft capital than the other teams in there, but that was to get some really high-end veterans to this team as well. So I thought all 4 teams in the NFC East did a really strong job. I don't give individual grades, but if I was giving grades, all of these teams would have solid grades, somewhere B and up into the A's, because I did like what all 4 teams did here in the NFC East. Let's pivot this over to the NFC North. Let's start with the Chicago Bears. First round, pick 10 overall, they took Michigan tight end Colston Loveland. Top of the 2nd round, pick 39, they took Missouri wide receiver Luther Burden. Later on in round 2, they took Boston College offensive tackle Ozzie Trapillo. Later in the 2nd round, they took Texas A&M defensive tackle Shamar Turner. Top of the 4th round, or I should say late 4th round, Maryland linebacker Ruben Hypolo. 5th round, UT San Antonio quarterback Za Frazier. 6th round, Michigan State offensive guard Luke Newman. And then the 7th round, Rutgers running back Hamanangai. It's clear that Ben Johnson is looking to add explosiveness to this offense, adding big-time weapons on top of the players they already have there. That's what this whole draft class was about. Fortifying the offensive line with another couple of picks, more playmakers to give Ben Johnson everything he needs. And this was after Chicago was already aggressive in free agency. My 2 favorite picks, the top 2 picks, Colston Loveland and Luther Burden. Those are 2 of my guys. Luther Burden was my number 3 wide receiver. His 2023 film was the best wide receiver film of anybody in this draft class. And Colston Loveland was my number 1 tight end, even ahead of Tyler Warren. So 2 really impactful wide receivers that I think could be really impactful players at the next level. Those are my 2 favorite picks. My value pick, I'll put that Akamanungai in the 7th round. I thought he easily could have went in the 5th round, 6th round. I was not expecting him to be there late in the 7th round. I really do think Ben Johnson could look at him, and I think there's a real chance Manungai in time develops into a integral part of that backfield in a committee role, but he could envision, to a lesser extent, but similar type performance from Manungai for what David Montgomery offered him in Detroit. Tough, physical interior runner. I think Manungai could fit in well there. I was surprised they didn't make an investment until a little bit earlier at the running back position. I think they might have went for Travion Henderson in the 2nd round if he was available, but he got sniped right before then. They pivoted to Luther Burden to give him another playmaker. My value pick, Kamanungai, like I just talked about. My one questionable decision ties into the Kamanungai is I don't think DeAndre Swift is the long-term answer there. I'm surprised they didn't invest somewhere. They had all those picks in round 2. They had a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th. I'm surprised they didn't target a running back in like the 4th round or the 5th round with a little bit more upside, a little bit more big playability, maybe complete running back that can impact the game as a receiver or a runner. That was my one issue with the Bears draft. Next up, the Lions draft. End of 1st round, pick 28, they took Ohio State defensive tackle Tyleik Williams. End of the 2nd round, they took Georgia offensive guard Tate Ratledge. 3rd round, they make an aggressive trade up. They trade 2 future 3rd round picks and their late 3rd round pick this year to go get wide receiver from Arkansas, Isaac Tesla. In the 5th round, they take LSU offensive guard Miles Frazier. In the 6th round, Boise State edge Ahmad Hassan. In the 7th round, a pair of picks, they took Georgia safety Dan Jackson and Georgia wide receiver Dominic Lovett. All in all, I thought it was a typical Lions draft in terms of the personalities they brought in. I think they fit the team well. I think they fit Dan Campbell well. But all in all, I thought there were some spots here that they were a little bit too aggressive in drafting their guys. They didn't let the board play out. My favorite pick was Tate Ratledge, late 2nd. If he would have went mid-2nd or even early 2nd, the athletic profile coming from Georgia, the tough physicality he offers, I could have seen him going early to mid-2nd. So that was a really good pick there. I really like that pick. I think he fits perfect with their offensive line. My value pick, I thought Miles Frazier was a top 100 player. I thought he had a real chance to come in and be a starter in the interior of an O-line. So they got him in the 5th round. And then while I don't know if he's ever going to get an opportunity to really be a player there, I really like the 7th round pick of Dominic Lovett out of Georgia, buried on the depth chart, but I thought he had a skill set of like a 5th round wide receiver. So for them to get him at 244 overall, I thought was a really good job by them. My questionable moves or picks. The trade up for Isaac Tesla was a little stunning, if I'm being nice. I like Isaac Tesla. I thought he was a intriguing prospect somewhere on day 3. For them to give up 3 3rd round picks to move up and take him in the early part of the 3rd round, I was extremely surprised with that aggressiveness. Amon-Ra St. Brown's there. I think they're keeping Jameson Williams and going to give him a contract extension. They have Sam Laporta. They have Jahmyr Gibbs. So even if Isaac Tesla performs well and develops into a role player for them, unless they get rid of Jameson Williams, he's the 5th option in the wide receiver, in the pass catching room. After you count in Jahmyr Gibbs and Sam Laporta, 2 of the better pass catchers at their respective positions. It seemed like an aggressive move up for a prospect that also might have just been there if they let the draft play itself out. My other questionable decision was taking Tyleik Williams at pick 28. I like the player a lot. It did seem like that might have been a little bit aggressive there. I see a scenario where maybe they could have moved back a couple picks, picked up an extra draft capital that they then could have used in that Isaac Tesla trade, and they could have still got Tyleik Williams maybe at the top of the 2nd round. So I think they could have played the board a little bit better there and still maybe came away with Tyleik Williams, even though I do love the player. Next up, the Packers. 1st round, pick 23 overall, they took Texas wide receiver Matthew Golden. Late 2nd round, they took North Carolina State offensive tackle, offensive guard Anthony Belton. In the 3rd round, they took TCU wide receiver Savion Williams. In the 4th round, they took Texas edge Barron Sorrell. In the 5th round, they took Oklahoma State edge rusher Colin Oliver. 6th round, they took Georgia defensive tackle Warren Brinson. In the 7th round, they made a pair of picks and took Tulane cornerback Micah Robinson and Cincinnati offensive tackle John Williams. I thought the Packers draft had some interesting picks. There was a couple areas that I questioned, a couple that I thought were a little bit reaches. Let's go through it. Favorite pick was Matthew Golden. I like Matthew Golden. Thought he adds a uniqueness. I applaud Green Bay for finally making an investment at the wide receiver position in round 1. For years, we have wanted them to make an investment at the wide receiver position. This year, it was Matthew Golden. There is a lot of depth at the wide receiver position for Green Bay, but Jaden Reed took a step back last year. It doesn't appear Christian Watson is ever going to live up to the draft type that I think some people wanted him to be and the player they wanted him to be. Romeo Doubs got suspended last year, and I think he's just the guy, and I think he plays too much for them, to be frankly honest with you. So and then Dontavian Wicks has a lot of issues catching the ball and ball skills. So you look at this wide receiver core, they don't have a true number 1. I think you can make the case they don't even have a true number 2. So investing in Matthew Golden, I do not think was a luxury. I think it was a necessity. I think last year, after Jordan Love came back from injury, they were a very conservative team. I do not think that's the kind of team they want to be. And I think part of it was they just didn't have a lot of trust in their wide receivers. I think Matthew Golden could add a 3-level player. He can win short to intermediate. He can win vertical as well. He can make things happen after the catch. Even if he doesn't play up to that 4.29 speed, I think he's still got like 4.4 speed on the football field, and that could be plenty good enough to be an important piece in that offense. Second, value pick, Warren Brinson, 6th round pick, 198 overall. If Brunson would have went late 4th or early 5th, I would have thought it was a solid pick. So for them to get him at pick 198 overall, I thought it was really good value for Warren Brinson. My questionable move or decision was you took Matthew Golden in round 1, which I applauded. But I was surprised where you came back and took Savion Williams in the 3rd round. Because now that wide receiver room's got a lot of names. What's the plan for Savion Williams? If he gets, are they just going to use him as a gadget player and use him in a variety of ways as a manufactured touch player? But if they're going to do that, I think 87 is too high for that. They already do different things with Jaden Reed to manufacture touches with him. So I was surprised that Savion Williams went as high as he did. And my other questionable move from them was the Anthony Belton move. I like Anthony Belton, the player, but I thought he was more top 100. Late in the 3rd round, I was surprised he went late in the 2nd round to pick 54 overall. So Belton, a little bit high on him. Question the Savion Williams. I do like the Barron Sorrell pick. The Colin Oliver pick is a really interesting pick, especially a guy who the snaps that he played, very impactful player. So I like some of the things they did there in the mid rounds with Barron Sorrell and Colin Oliver, but have some questions about Savion Williams and Anthony Belton, their 2nd and 3rd round picks. I thought they could have went in a different direction. Next up, the Vikings. 1st round, they stayed put. A lot of people thought they were going to trade back. I'll talk about that momentarily. At pick 24, they finish off their remade offensive line by taking Ohio State offensive guard Donovan Jackson. In the 3rd round, late 3rd round, they take Maryland wide receiver Ty Felton. 5th round, they took Georgia defensive tackle Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins. 6th round, they took Penn State linebacker Kobe King. And then also in the 6th round, they took Pittsburgh tight end Gavin Bartholomew. Favorite pick is Donovan Jackson, but it does come with a caveat in terms of my questionable pick and move also. So let's tie them together. I like Donovan Jackson, the player. I think he steps right in, finishes off their remade offensive line, tough, physical. He's got the versatility to play offensive tackle if you need. So I like that aspect of Donovan Jackson. But with a team which was very short on picks, I'm surprised they didn't look to make that move with the Giants or the Falcons. I'm sure the Giants and Falcons were touching base with all those teams in the mid-20s, from like 23, 24, 25, 26. The Giants eventually found the partner at 25. The Falcons found the partner at 26. So I'm assuming Minnesota could have made one of those trades. Maybe they lose out on Donovan Jackson. Maybe he falls to those picks at 34 or middle of 2nd round. Probably not the mid-2nd round, but definitely the Giants pick probably at 34. There was probably a real chance that he could have went. Okay? If they would have lost out on him, they could have pivoted. I know there wasn't as good of a guard being taken there, but maybe they could have pivoted, traded back again, and took a guy like Tate Ratledge, who I think also would have finished making that remade offensive line. So one of my questionable moves is not looking to trade back with the Giants or Falcons if it was possible to accumulate more picks, give them more bites at the apple, so to speak. The other decision was, I know they traded a 5th round pick for Jordan Mason, but Aaron Jones is getting up there in age. Mason is a guy who I think is a solid reserve running back, really shined in San Francisco's scheme when he was filling in for Christian McCaffrey. But in this year's draft class, with how many great running back prospects there were and the depth of this class, I was a little bit surprised they at some point didn't pull the trigger round 5, round 6 on a running back. I would have liked them to take a chance in the 6th round on like Damian Martinez or Brashard Smith than a guy like Gavin Bartholomew, who's maybe profiles as a tight end 3 at the NFL. So that was that, and the not trading back if the option was there were my 2 decisions about Minnesota that I questioned. If we take a look at the NFC East, the NFC North draft rankings, I'd put Chicago at number 1. I'd put the Lions at number 2. I'd put Green Bay at number 3. I'd put the Vikings at number 4. Compared to the NFC East, I was not as enamored with the draft classes from the NFC North. I thought the Bears had a really good draft, but after the Bears, if I was grading on letters, Detroit, Green Bay, and Minnesota, all of these draft classes, unlike the ones I said about the NFC East teams, The Lions, Packers, and the Vikings would have been towards the bottom of my cumulative rankings, would have probably all been grades somewhere in like the C's if I was giving out specific grades like that. The Bears would have had a really strong grade. I liked what the Bears did. But the Lions, Packers, and Vikings, I thought there was a lot more that I questioned than I liked about them. Let's take this to the NFC South. Start up with the Atlanta Falcons. At pick 15 overall, they took Georgia edge rusher Jelon Walker. At pick 26 overall, they came back in with a bold, aggressive trade, which I'll talk about momentarily. They took edge rusher James Pierce Jr. In the third round, they took Notre Dame safety Xavier Watts. They did have to move up 5 picks to get that, make that happen, and cost them a future 5. In the fourth round, they took Oklahoma safety Billy Bowman. And in the late 7th round or mid-7th round, they took Wisconsin offensive tackle Jack Nelson. Favored picks, and I'll go into detail on this. I love a lot of what Atlanta did in terms of the prospects that they acquired. Jelon Walker, I thought, was a top 8 player in this draft class. They get him all the way at pick 15. The versatility that he offers. He can play off the ball. He can be an edge rusher. Very impactful in a variety of ways. The character is pristine. He's a leader on defense. I think he fits exactly what they want as a leader of that team on the defensive side. I think Walker could be that player. James Pierce was one of my guys. If you watched my guy episode, I talked about James Pierce. You can make the case his explosiveness at getting after the quarterback and his high-end traits. He's the second best pure pass rusher in this draft class after Abdul Carter. Billy Bowman, most people had him in their top 100. I thought he was going to go in the top 100. They get him in the middle of the 4th round. He's a starting nickel corner. I think he could be impactful in the nickel, same way Andrew Phillips was last year for the Giants. I think Billy Bowman, I love the versatility, the ball skills. Adds a certain style player there that the Falcons were missing. I think he's going to take the nickel very sooner rather than later. The elephant in the room, the questionable decision. They've been hammered from every single angle about trading that 2026 first-round pick to move back up to get James Pierce. And I get it. There's always concern about trading a future first-round pick because if things bottom out, if Michael Penix isn't good, or he gets hurt and they happen to trade Kirk Cousins, which I think is becoming more unlikely by the day, that pick could turn into a top 10 pick. And then you look at it as very regretful. But the perspective that I also think people are not talking about enough is that there was another pick that came back. Yes, they gave up their mid-second round pick and they gave up their future first round pick in 26, but they got back a late 3rd round pick that they then used to be able to still get Xavier Watts. So there's a couple angles you could look at this. One, they were locked in on James Pierce Jr. at 15. I really believe that. So for them, when they pivoted to Jelon Walker, they wanted to still get the guy that they were planning on taking at 15 all along, but they couldn't pass up Jelon Walker, and they probably figured we might be able to trade back in for James Pierce. Jelon Walker's probably not going to last much longer. But for them, that trade up probably was looked at as we want Walker. We were already going to always get Pierce at 15, so you could look at it as acquiring, Walker in that regards. The other way you can look at it is they got their first round pick next year a year early, and all it cost them was a move back from 46 to 101. That's not a huge separation, mid-second to late 3rd, to get your first round pick next year a year early and fill a huge need. They don't envision picking next year in the top 10. And like I said, it could fall out, which is always the risk of this. But my guess is if they were really honed in on James Pierce Jr. at the 15th pick overall, they probably had him as a top 12 player in their draft class, maybe even top 10. So they look at it as that we get a top 10, top 12 player at a premium position and a huge area of need. And yes, it costs us next year's one, but by getting that first now instead of waiting a year, well, that comes with a price. And the price was pivoting from 46 to 101. Now, the other thing is, whether we want to believe him or not, it does sound like Xavier Watts would have been their pick at 46. So if Xavier Watts would have been their pick at 46 and they still ended up getting him in that late 3rd round pick that they had gotten back from Los Angeles, that even makes the trade look better from their perspective. So there's ways that I love this, and I applaud Atlanta's aggressiveness. They needed to get edge rushers. They got 2 premium edge rushers in this draft class, and they got their next year first round pick a year early, and it cost them slipping back from about 50 picks or so, from 46 to 101. Is it risky? Of course it's risky, but only if things bottom out and or Michael Penix is not a good starting quarterback. If they're picking, even if they're picking 12 or 15 or 18, I think they're still going to be happy with the deal because they got a guy who was probably top 12 on their board this year, a year earlier. So there's a lot of avenues where this works out for Atlanta. There's a scenario where it's a disaster, but I think that scenario is less likely than it working out for them. So I don't mind it as much as other people. I think people are not acting like they got that pick 101 back, and third round picks are pretty valuable in the NFL draft. We see veterans traded for third round picks and they're high-end caliber players. So that third pick matters. I feel like people are just kind of forgetting, like they're like, oh, they came up 20 picks and it cost them next year's one. That's crazy. Yeah, but they also got that third round pick, and that became a high-end caliber player in Xavier Watts, who most people thought had as like the 50th or so best player in this draft class that only fell, surprisingly fell, but could have easily been a pick in the mid-second round. I comped him very much to what Tyler Nubin was last year. So I'm not nearly as down on the Atlanta draft as what other people are. I see their reasoning. I understand the risk associated with it, but I think it was worth it for them, especially this regime. They got to fix the defense. They gave Raheem Morris all the things he needs to turn this defense around. Next up, Tampa Bay Bucks. First round, pick 19 overall. They took Ohio State wide receiver Emeka Egbuka. Second round, they took Notre Dame cornerback Benjamin Morris. Third round, they took Kansas State quarterback Jacob Parrish. Fourth round, Central Arkansas edge David Walker. Fifth round, Southern Methodist edge rusher Elijah Roberts. Seventh round, Oregon wide receiver Tej Johnson. Overall, I thought the Bucks had a really solid draft. I liked what they did, top to bottom. A couple of surprising things I'll get into. My favorite picks, two guys on day 3 I thought were two of my favorite picks, Tej Johnson and David Walker. David Walker, the edge rusher out of Central Arkansas, I thought he could have snuck in the top 100. I like that pick. I think he's a developmental pass rusher. He doesn't have to jump right in immediately, but I think he's going to get an opportunity to be a situational player this year, develop maybe into a starter down the line. And then I know Tej Johnson, he's an outlier. But all you do is if you watch the Oregon film and you watch the Senior Bowl, nobody can cover him. And I don't know when he's going to get an opportunity because their wide receiver depth chart is loaded. But I like the player. I thought the 7th round for that caliber player was a high-end pick for them, that if he would have went in the 5th round or even the 4th round, I don't think anybody, we would have said it's an outlier. Can he do the transition? But for him to go in the 7th round, I thought was not only one of my favorite picks, it was also tremendous value. He can be classified as one of my value picks for the Bucks as well. But I'll also put, just to give a different name, I'll put Benjamin Morris as my value pick for Tampa Bay. I questioned the first round pick, and I'll get to that momentarily, because I wanted them to get a starting caliber quarterback. Well, Benjamin Morris falls because of the injury, but he's a late round 1 to early round 2 draft pick that they ended up getting at the end of the 2nd round. So to me, that value that they got on Morrison is unbelievable. And then you had the value with Tej Johnson as well. I like that. The one questionable move or decision, I love Emeka Egbuka, the player, but I do question the depth chart that they have. They brought back Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is still playing really high-level football. Jalen McMillan was a really good rookie last year. So while I like the player Egbuka, I just question whether that was the right move in round 1 when they could have continued to fortify their defense, maybe took in an edge rusher at that position. Their defense was very poor. We saw what Kirk Cousins did last year in those 2 games where he had like 800 yards or whatever, and whatever the amount of touchdowns were. So while I like Egbuka, the player, I think he'll eventually emerge and push Jalen McMillan to the 4th spot and then eventually be a starter, once either, if Godwin doesn't recover fully in terms of playing up to the highest level he was prior to the injury, or Evans starts to show his age a little bit. I compared it very much to when Jackson Smith-Njigba was drafted by Seattle. They had 2 established guys there, and slowly but surely Smith-Njigba rose to the top, but it took some time. That's what I kind of envision the Egbuka scenario playing itself out. And I just wonder if maybe they should have pivoted to the defensive side. I don't have any worries or concerns about Tampa Bay scoring enough points with their team. I think it's whether or not they can stop enough people will impact how far of a run they can make if they make the playoffs. Next up, the Carolina Panthers. First round, pick 8 overall, they took Arizona wide receiver Tedoroa McMillan. Second round, they took Texas A&M edge Nick Scourton. Third round, they took Ole Miss edge Princely Umanye. Fourth round, they had 2 picks. They took Georgia running back Trevor Etienne and also Ohio State safety Latham Ransom. Fifth round, they took Florida defensive tackle Cam Jackson. Also, Notre Dame tight end Mitchell Evans. And then the 6th round, they took Colorado wide receiver Jimmy Horn. Favorite pick, when you have a young quarterback, you need to create that infrastructure around him. They set him up to fail that first year. Into the second year, they benched him. He learned a little bit sitting on the bench behind Andy Dalton. He looked much better second half of last year when he came back into the starting lineup. But they are lacking. Yes, they've invested in running backs, but they didn't have a true number 1 wide receiver. That is not Xavier Legette. The offensive line was questionable. So this year, they go out and get him Tedero McMillan. Now, listen, I like McMillan. I don't love McMillan. He was my number 2 wide receiver, but I thought this was a down wide receiver class all in all. I don't see Drake London or T. Higgins. I see more Michael Pittman or Cortland Sutton, but that's a good starting number 1 wide receiver for most teams. Not every team has a transcendent talent at the wide receiver position. If he could be Michael Pittman, if he could be Cortland Sutton, that is an important aspect that this team was sorely lacking. And then they could always make another investment at the wide receiver down the line, or hope that Xavier Legette develops, or maybe McMillan surprises me and he is somewhere between T. Higgins and Drake London. I think he's more Pittman or Sutton, but I could easily be wrong on that, and he's more Higgins to Drake London caliber player. But I think investing in a big-time wide receiver, he gives Bryce Young a big-time target, can throw the ball up to him. McMillan's great body control and ball skills. So that was my favorite pick, but I also like them double down. I know it was late in the draft, but I'm intrigued by Colorado wide receiver Jimmy Horn Jr. Right now, it's a little bit of a crowded depth chart. They have, we talked about Xavier Legette. They have Adam Thielen. They just signed Hunter Renfrow. But if Jimmy Horn gets a chance, I think he could be a really explosive player if they find the right way to use him. And I think he might get a chance there to slowly work his way up the depth chart. And even if he could become their number 4 wide receiver at some point, he adds this explosive element. They don't have that right now. Xavier Legette could offer it a little bit, but Jimmy Horn could do more. Jimmy Horn could also offer it in a different way. Xavier Legette is big, tough, uses that physicality. He's got that straight line acceleration and burst, but Jimmy Horn can be a guy that makes you miss a little bit as well. So he adds a little bit of a different dynamic if he gets an opportunity to emerge. My value pick, Lathan Ransom, I thought if he would have went late round 3 to early round 4, would have been solid picks. So they get him a little bit more towards the latter part of round 4. So a little bit of value there. I didn't see any other great values jumping out at me when I was looking at their board. Maybe Cam Jackson, the big time run stuffing defensive tackle in the 5th round. If he would have went in the 4th round, I could have understood that. My questionable move, though, was the Trevor Etienne pick. Early 4th round, there was a lot of really good players. Like Marcus Bowe was still there, who the Giants got in the 5th round. A team still trying to build up the offensive line around their young quarterback. I would have much pivoted away from the running back position. They signed Rico Dowdle in free agency. They gave Chuba Hubbard a big contract last year, and he played great. They drafted Jonathan Brooks in the 2nd round. Now, I know we might not see much from Jonathan Brooks this year, but I just didn't think they needed to invest another pretty decent draft capital on a running back when they have Jonathan Brooks hopefully down the line coming back if he can recover from this. Hubbard looked great. They signed him long-term. They signed Rico Dowdle. I just don't see a path. Now, I know Trevor Etienne offers something a little different than those other running backs, big playability, explosiveness, but he wasn't a consistent player, even though he never lived up to that high-level athleticism and big playability. You saw in bits and pieces. I just thought there was a different avenue for them to use that pick to maybe help out Bryce Young, whether it was an earlier wide receiver instead of Jimmy Horn, or whether it was another offensive lineman. A guy like Marcus Bowe would have been a guy who I really would have liked there at that pick instead of Trevor Etienne. Next up, the Saints. 1st round pick, 9 overall. They drafted Texas offensive lineman. He's going to play tackle for them, Calvin Banks Jr. In the 2nd round, Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck. In the 3rd round, Texas defensive tackle Vernon Brodin. Later in the 3rd round, Virginia safety Jonas Senker. In the 4th round, Oklahoma linebacker Danny Stutzman. Later in the 4th round, Louisville quarterback Quincy Riley. In the 6th round, Kansas running back Devin Neal. In the 7th round, a pair of picks, UCLA tight end Moliki Matavio and Syracuse edge Fadil Diggs. I didn't really love what the Saints did. A couple picks I thought were really questionable, a little bit reaching. I liked a few things they did, so let's go through it. My favorite picks, Kelvin Banks in round 1. They didn't reach on a quarterback. They need to fix that O-line. Kelvin Banks, at that time, was the best offensive lineman left on the board. Membo was gone. Will Campbell was gone. So Banks was the right pick there for that team, I think better than the edge rusher. I liked the Danny Stutzman pick in the 4th round. Most people thought he was a late 3, early 4. They took him in the appropriate value. I think he could step right in and quickly emerge to be a starting linebacker in the near future. My favorite value pick was Devin Neal. He was one of my guys at the running back position. I thought he was a round 4 caliber player. They got him all the way in the 6th round of pick 184 overall. I thought it was tremendous value. There's an opening there right after Alvin Kamara to be the running back too. I think he could possibly ascend as early as this year to be the backup behind Alvin Kamara and have a meaningful role in year 1, even as a 6th round rookie. So I really like that pick. My questionable moves. I didn't think Vernon Broughton was a top 100 player. I thought he was more of a 4th round, maybe even early 5th round player. I did not see pick 71 overall. He was not in a lot of top 100 big boards. He was mostly considered, like in the mid to late 4th round range. That's where he was in most big boards. I thought there were better defensive tackles left than Broughton in the 3rd round, pick 71 overall. Although there were other positions they could have pivoted to and then brought in either later, and he would have potentially been there when they took Quincy Riley or Danny Stutzman in the 4th round. The other big questionable move is taking Louisville quarterback Tyler Shuck. Now, there were aspects of Tyler Shuck's game that I found really intriguing. I thought he was worthy of a day 2 pick as a developmental quarterback, if not a quality backup. But I would have liked him more round 3 than top of the 2nd round there, pick 40. You take a guy at the top of the 2nd round, pick 40, you think they're going to emerge into be a starter. I'm not sure Tyler Shuck is a long-term starter for the Saints. Also, I know the reports were that they weren't in on him, but they left Shedeur Sanders there. They left Jalen Milroe was there. I would have been much more intrigued with a developmental guy like Milroe or even Sanders trying to develop from that than an older player like Tyler Shuck, who I just do have question marks about his ability to handle pressure. Their offensive line is still an area of work. I think Tyler Shuck could really struggle behind that line, shatter some confidence. So I just didn't think it was the right time for a quarterback. And if it was, I would have went for either a guy who I thought was a little bit better at handling pressure like Shedeur, who was used to it at Colorado, or the athletic prospect in Milroe, who could have bought time with his legs. So that's where I would have pivoted there. NFC South draft rankings. Going to be controversial, but number 1 is Atlanta for me. The haul they brought in, I know there's risk associated with it, but I think they upgraded the most in terms of quality players. I think they got potentially 4 guys who could be impactful starters on this team as soon as this year. That's going to make their defense significantly better. Carolina was number 2. I like the addition of Tet McMillan, a couple other picks they got there. I thought it was the right thing investing in that pick for Bryce Young to get Tet McMillan. I liked what the Bucs did. Again, maybe Egbuka wouldn't have been my pick, but I understand why he was in terms of just maybe best player available. They did come back from that and really fortify the defense with the rest of their picks. And then the Saints, for the variety of reasons I just talked about, they would be the one. All in all, I liked Atlanta. I liked Carolina. I liked the Bucs. They would all be classified as good drafts. If I was giving letter grades, they'd all be somewhere B and up. Saints would have been the one that would be somewhere in like the C range and would be towards the bottom of my overall team rankings in terms of the draft class. Let's take this to the NFC West. I'm going to start with the Arizona Cardinals. 1st round, pick 16 overall, Ole Miss defensive tackle Walter Nolan. 2nd round, Michigan cornerback Will Johnson. 3rd round, Oregon edge Jordan Birch. 4th round, Ohio State linebacker Cody Simon. 5th round, Ohio State cornerback Denzel Burke. 6th round, Texas guard Hayden Connor. 7th round, Nevada safety Keaton Crawford. Favorite picks, their first 2 picks. I think they nailed it. Walter Nolan in round 1, Will Johnson in round 2. There was buzz that Walter Nolan was going to maybe go top 10 the last 24 to 48 hours before the draft. Will Johnson, once upon a time, was considered a top 5, top 7 player in this class. No testing numbers, injury made him fall. But to fall all the way to pick 47, they were my 2 favorite picks. Will Johnson was also one of the best value picks in the entire draft. Another value pick that I really like a lot was Jordan Birch. I thought he could have went in the 2nd round. So for him to fall to pick 78, I thought it was really good value for Jordan Birch. So I really like the Nolan, Johnson, Birch, 1, 2, 3, right at the top of their draft class. I thought it was a fantastic use of their first 3 picks. My questionable move, small. I like Denzel Burke, the player. I just thought I would have invested a pick on an upside wide receiver on day 3 rather than another cornerback in round 5. There was some interesting wide receivers still on the board. I might have pivoted to that, but that's a small minor questionable move. It's hard to, defense has been a struggle of theirs. So for them just to keep adding numbers to that, and Denzel Burke coming from a big program, so I understand why. I think I would have just preferred maybe them invest in an upside wide receiver on day 3. I still have question marks about their wide receiver. I think Michael Wilson is more of like a solid, decent number 3, number 4 type wide receiver. And obviously they're hoping Marvin Harrison has a much better second year than first year. Next up, the Rams. They trade out. That was the big trade we talked about before with Atlanta. They take in the second round at pick 46 overall, Oregon tight end Terrence Ferguson. The third round, pick 90 overall, they take Michigan edge rusher Josiah Stewart. In the fourth round, they take Auburn running back Jarquez Hunter. In the fifth round, Ohio State defensive tackle Ty Hamilton. Another fifth round pick, Ole Miss linebacker Chris Paul Jr. And in the seventh round, Pittsburgh wide receiver Kanata Mumfield. I get the trade back. I love them picking up an extra first-round pick. I like it from Atlanta's perspective, but I also love it from the Rams' perspective as well. Get that 2026 first-round pick. Next year now, that 2 first-round picks. If they want to invest in a quarterback next year to be the heir apparent to Matthew Stafford, they have the ammo to move around and potentially get one. Also, my favorite pick, Josiah Stewart in the third round. I thought he could have been a top 75 player. He falls to pick 90. They have had so much success on these third, fourth round defensive players that have really emerged. I think Josiah Stewart's going to be the next guy. I think he could be an 8-9 sack type of guy. I love his ability to get after the quarterback. My value pick, Chris Paul, late fifth round, pick 172 overall. If he would have went to end of round 3 or to early round 4, I don't think that would have been a surprise for Ole Miss linebacker Chris Paul Jr. I think he could step in and eventually earn his way into a starting job there. So I like that pick a lot. My questionable move, Terrence Ferguson at pick 46 overall. I like Ferguson, a player, but I thought he was much more like mid to late round 3, not mid round 2, right in the middle of round 2. I would have pivoted to Elijah Arroyo ahead of Terrence Ferguson. I'm surprised Terrence Ferguson went ahead of Elijah Arroyo. But clearly they looking for him as a guy that they think could offer athleticism and pass catching ability at the tight end position. I don't think they would have drafted him if they don't have big plans for him in terms of being a pass catching weapon. So I think they are going to try to use him. Last year, not comparing the players, but last year there was a lot of buzz that they were trying to trade up to get Brock Bowers. So it's clear they've been looking for a pass catching weapon at the tight end position, and they came across Ferguson as that guy they wanted this year. The other questionable move is Jarquez Hunter. And it's not questioning the player, because I like the player and I think the fourth round was the appropriate value for him, but they just drafted Blake Corum last year in the third round. So now what is this? This either says one of two things. They don't have any intentions of re-signing Kyren Williams, I think, to a new contract at the end of this year when he becomes a free agent, and they'll give the reins to Blake Corum and Jarquez Hunter. Or 2, they're really down on Blake Corum, who didn't play a lot last year, and maybe they don't think he's going to be the player they thought he was going to be when they drafted him. To me, it's got to be one of those 2 scenarios. I'm not sure what scenario it is right now, but I just thought it was a questionable move after they took Blake Corum last year and how good Kyren Williams has been to make another investment at the running back position with a premium asset in the fourth round. So I like the picking up of the extra pick. I like Josiah Stewart. I do like the Ty Hamilton pick in the fifth round. That was good. That he was another good value pick with the Chris Paul pick as well. Ferguson wouldn't have been my tight end of choice. I would have passed on a running back position. So there were some things I liked, some things I questioned. The 49ers at pick 11, first round, they took Georgia edge Mykel Williams. Second round, Texas defensive tackle Alfred Collins. Third round, Oklahoma State linebacker Nick Martin. Later in the third round, Western Kentucky cornerback Upton Stout. Fourth round, they had 2 picks, defensive tackle CJ West out of Indiana. Ole Miss wide receiver Jordan Watkins. In the fifth round, Jordan James, running back out of Oregon. Later in the fifth round, Kansas State safety Marquez Siegel. Seventh round, a trio of picks. Curtis Rourke, quarterback out of Indiana. Connor Colby, offensive guard out of Iowa. And Junior Bergen, wide receiver, special teamer out of Montana State. This draft was all about refortifying the defensive line. Up and down, Williams, Collins, West, fortifying that offensive line was the goal of San Francisco. I think they accomplished it well. My favorite 2 picks were their first 2 picks, Mykel Williams and Alfred Collins. I think both of those guys step in and become immediate starters and impact players. Alfred Collins, great against the run, going to take up a lot of double teams, let the other players do their thing. Mykel Williams, tough physical power rusher with big time athleticism as well. Interesting additions there to the San Francisco front on the defensive side. My value pick, I put as Jordan James. If he would have went early round 4, I would have thought it was a solid pick. So for him to go 5th round, 147, I think he could be this year's Bucky Irving. Now, he might not get the opportunity because there's a Christian McCaffrey injury, and let's hope that doesn't happen again. But I thought Jordan James, quicker than fast, tough, compact, physical runner. I like Jordan James. I'm excited for maybe what he can bring down the line, either after Christian McCaffrey slows down or if there's an injury that opens up some playing time. I think Jordan James can be very effective. I think he could quickly leapfrog Isaac Guerrero as their number 2 running back there. My questionable move, end of the 4th round. There were some really intriguing wide receivers left. I get that Jordan Watkins aced the pre-draft process with a big-time combine performance in terms of his 40 and his athleticism, but that would not have been the wide receiver that I would have taken at that pick, 138. There was a bunch of other wide receivers that I liked ahead of him. I also thought it was a little high for Upton Stout at the end of the 3rd round. There were some other defensive backs that I would have preferred taking over him. Next up, the Seahawks to round it out. 1st round pick, 18 overall, they took North Dakota State offensive guard Gray Zabel. Top of the 2nd, South Carolina safety Nick Omari. Later in the 2nd round, they took Miami tight end Elijah Arroyo. 3rd round, they took Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe. 5th round, they took Notre Dame defensive tackle Riley Mills. Later in the 5th round, Colorado State wide receiver Torrey Horton. Another 5th round pick, they took Alabama blocking tight end Robbie Oots. 6th round, Kansas State offensive guard Bryce Cabledew. 7th round, trio of picks, Damian Martinez, Iowa offensive tackle Mason Richman, UNLV wide receiver Ricky White. I love the Seahawks draft. They're in my top 5, top 6 favorite drafts in the entire draft class. Favorite picks, Jalen Miller, Elijah Arroyo, Gray Zabel, top and down. Zabel, immediate plug-and-play starter, versatility all over the offensive line. Elijah Arroyo, I think he was the 4th best tight end in this class. I think I comped him to a slightly less athletic version of Evan Ingram, but maybe better ball skills. So I think Arroyo can step in there, tack the seam. He can do a lot of different things. He could even kick outside and play some regular wide receiver, but he's going to be a nice weapon there with Jackson Smith-Njigba and Cooper Kupp. And then Jalen Milroe, anyone who's been listening to Saturday Sunday knows how much I like Jalen Milroe. He was my 3rd quarterback in this draft class after Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders. I think he's the perfect scenario. You start working him in there with a variety of ways. You see what Sam Howell does this year. They can get out of that Sam Howell contract after 1 year. If they think Jalen Milroe maybe has learned and developed the way they want, they could potentially have stolen a starting quarterback there at pick 92. I'm betting on Jalen Milroe being one of those outliers that makes it from the day 2 to become a starting quarterback. That's how much I'm intrigued by his skill set. Value picks, Milroe is a value. Damian Martinez in the 7th round. I wasn't as high on Martinez as some people, but that's because I didn't see him as a 3rd round pick. I still thought he was a 4th or 5th round pick. So for him, if they end up moving on from Charbonnet or Kenneth Walker, Damian Martinez can step right up and have a role with that with that Seahawks backfield down the line. And then my questionable pick, the Robbie Oots, that most people thought Robbie Oots was going to be an undrafted free agent. I didn't see him on many people's boards as a draftable grade. If he was, it would have been late in the draft as just a pure blocking tight end. So I was very surprised. I know they had a plethora of picks, so they might look at him as a clear tight end 3, plug and play. When they want that clear blocking tight end, he's going to step in and immediately be that. That's my guess of why they made the investment. I just thought they maybe could have got him later in the draft or maybe as a priority free agent. But with so many other picks in the 6th and 7th round, that would have been where I targeted Robbie Oots. I thought there was a lot of value still to be had at pick 175 overall. NFC West draft rankings. I just talked about Seattle and how much I love them. They were number 1. Arizona was 2. San Francisco was 3. The Rams were 4. I already talked about Seahawks being one of my best drafts. They would have been somewhere in the A range. Cardinals I like. 49ers I like. They would have been somewhere in the B range. Rams, I love getting the future 1st round pick, so that's a win right there. But at the same time, I question of a bunch of their moves. I would have probably given them a grade somewhere in like that C+ range if I was giving them a draft grade as well. So there it is, guys. My thoughts on every single team in the NFC by division, favorite picks, value picks, questionable moves and picks, ranking the teams in each of the divisions, my favorite draft hauls, and a projected what my grade would be if I was giving out grades. If you're enjoying this, please get over to the website, S2S Football, fastest and easiest way to get there. It's still not too late to buy the premium notebooks and really help us out here at Saturday to Sunday. I promise you will get a lot of value from it. The rankings notebook has all my Dynasty rookie rankings. It has my film rankings from before the draft. I soon will be adding IDP rookie rankings to that as well. And then after I do the IDP rookie rankings in the next week or so, then I will turn my attention to updating my positional Dynasty overall rankings, taking into all the account of the moves of free agency and the draft. And that'll be fully updated as well for startup Dynasty leagues, for trading in your Dynasty offseason as well. The Devy rankings are there as well. The Scouting notebook detailed player profiles on about 100 offensive skill players. And then the draft projections notebook, the draft came and gone, but you can still get a lot of value from that. It has my thoughts on almost 375 to 400 draft prospects as well. So if you can consider purchasing it, it really helps us out. If you bought it in the past but didn't pick it up this year, please consider picking it up and helping us. If you're new to Saturday, Sunday, and you could help us out with the investment of that of $9.99, we would greatly appreciate it. We'll be back next podcast doing AFC team-by-team recaps. Hopefully you join us for that one as well. So on behalf of our sound tech engineer, David Nakano, and myself, thank you for joining us, and we look forward next time taking you from Saturday to Sunday.